He spoke softly of gunfire and rescue. They rolled their eyes. Old man stories, they said. Then one day, the screen lit up. Classified footage. His voice. His face. His actions. And suddenly, no one dared interrupt. Because some stories aren't legends. They're truth waiting to be seen. The nursing home's recreation room buzzed with polite but distracted conversation as residents gathered for their weekly social hour. In his usual corner chair sat Eddie Martinez, whose stories about Vietnam had become as predictable as the afternoon medication rounds. The staff smiled patiently when he began another tale about helicopter rescues and enemy fire, treating his accounts like harmless fiction from a mind that mixed memory with imagination. Most residents had learned to nod politely when Eddie described missions that seemed too dramatic for reality, battles too intense for one man to have survived, rescues too heroic for someone now struggling to remember where he left his reading glasses. His stories had the quality of movies rather than memories, filled with details that seemed borrowed from war films rather than lived experience. The younger staff members would exchange knowing glances when Eddie described commanding helicopters under fire, pulling wounded soldiers from impossible situations, making split-second decisions that saved lives while bullets flew around him. Their gentle dismissal was understandable. The frail man before them seemed incapable of the heroics he described with such conviction and startling detail. Welcome to Silent Salute. Before we continue this remarkable story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. The Sunset Manor Care Facility had become Eddie's home 3 years earlier when advancing dementia made independent living impossible. His daughter Maria had chosen the facility carefully, seeking a place that would provide appropriate medical care while maintaining dignity for veterans who had served their country with honor. The staff had been trained to treat military residents with respect, understanding that their service deserved recognition even when their stories seemed embellished by time and memory loss. Eddie's background as a helicopter pilot had been documented in his admission paperwork, but the details of his service had been sketchy. His medals and commendations were stored in his room's display case, but their significance wasn't clear to staff members who lacked military experience. To them, Eddie was simply another elderly veteran whose war stories provided entertainment rather than historical documentation. The social activities coordinator, Janet Morrison, had initially encouraged Eddie's storytelling as therapeutic exercise that helped him maintain verbal skills and social engagement. But as his stories became more elaborate and seemingly fantastical, she began viewing them as symptoms of cognitive decline rather than legitimate memories of military service. The other residents had mixed reactions to Eddie's war stories. Some veterans nodded knowingly, understanding that combat experiences often sounded unbelievable to people who hadn't been there. Others dismissed his accounts as the confused memories of someone whose mind was failing, whose grip on reality had been compromised by age and disease. Eddie's stories followed consistent patterns that suggested either remarkable memory for detail or consistent delusion about experiences that had never happened. He described specific dates, locations, unit designations, and personnel with precision that was either impressive recall or elaborate fantasy. His accounts included technical details about helicopter operations, military procedures, and combat tactics that seemed beyond the knowledge of someone experiencing cognitive decline. The transformation in Eddie's credibility began with an unexpected visit from Dr. Sarah Chun, a military historian researching helicopter operations during the Vietnam War. She had been referred to Sunset Manor by the Veterans Administration, which had suggested that Eddie Martinez might have information relevant to her study of aviation units that had conducted particularly dangerous rescue missions during the conflict. Dr. Chin's initial interview with Eddie had been scheduled as routine data collection, part of her broader effort to document veteran experiences before they were lost to time and mortality. She expected to gather general information about helicopter operations, possibly some useful anecdotes about military life, but nothing that would significantly contribute to her academic research. But Eddie's responses to Dr. Chin's questions revealed knowledge that went far beyond general military experience. His descriptions of specific helicopter models, technical specifications, operational procedures, and tactical considerations demonstrated expertise that couldn't be faked or imagined. His memories included details that only someone with extensive flight experience would know. More significantly, Eddie's accounts of specific missions included information that Dr. Chun recognized from classified military documents she had been granted access to for her research. His descriptions matched official reports of operations that had been conducted by elite helicopter units during some of the war's most dangerous periods. The verification process that Dr. Chun initiated revealed that Eddie Martinez had been one of the most decorated helicopter pilots of the Vietnam War, with a service record that included missions so dangerous they had been classified for decades after their completion. His unit had conducted rescue operations behind enemy lines, transportation missions into heavily defended areas, and support operations for special forces teams operating in hostile territory. The footage that Dr. Chun discovered in Pentagon archives transformed Eddie from questionable storyteller to documented war hero. Combat camera teams had recorded several of his missions, creating visual evidence that validated every detail of stories that nursing home staff had dismissed as fantasy. The black and white footage showed Eddie piloting helicopters through intense enemy fire while executing rescues that saved American lives under impossible circumstances. The decision to show the footage at Sunset Manor created a moment that would be remembered by everyone present. Dr. Chun had arranged for projection equipment to be brought to the recreation room, intending to provide Eddie with validation while educating staff and residents about his actual service record and its significance. The silence that fell over the recreation room as the footage began playing was absolute and profound. The grainy black and white images showed a young Eddie Martinez piloting a helicopter through tracer fire, landing in contested areas to evacuate wounded soldiers, making multiple trips into danger zones while enemy forces tried to shoot down his aircraft. Eddie's voice could be heard on the audio track, calm and professional as he coordinated with ground forces, called for medical support, and made tactical decisions under pressure that would have paralyzed most people. The contrast between the frail man sitting in the corner chair and the fearless pilot on screen was startling and transformative. The staff members who had politely dismissed Eddie's stories found themselves witnessing documented proof that every detail he had described was not only true but understated compared to what the footage revealed. His accounts of heroism under fire, split-second decision-making, and repeated exposure to deadly situations were validated by visual evidence that made their previous skepticism seem shameful. Other residents who had questioned Eddie's credibility watched in amazement as the footage confirmed that the quiet man they had known for 3 years was actually one of the most heroic figures any of them had ever encountered. His stories weren't the confused ramblings of cognitive decline, but accurate memories of extraordinary service that had saved American lives. The emotions in the room were overwhelming as the full impact of what they were witnessing became clear. Staff members who had treated Eddie's stories as harmless fiction found themselves crying as they realized they had been dismissing authentic accounts of heroism that deserved respect and honor rather than polite indifference. Dr. Chun provided narration that explained the significance of what they were seeing, describing how Eddie's missions had been among the most dangerous conducted during the entire war, how his skill and courage had made the difference between life and death for hundreds of American soldiers, how his service had been classified to protect operational security but had never received appropriate public recognition. The footage continued for nearly an hour, showing mission after mission where Eddie had risked his life to save others. Each sequence demonstrated flying skills, tactical judgment, and personal courage that exceeded anything the nursing home staff had imagined possible. The young pilot on screen performed miracles of aviation and heroism that seemed to defy both physics and human limitations. As the presentation concluded, the recreation room remained silent while everyone processed what they had witnessed. The transformation in how Eddie was perceived was immediate and permanent. He was no longer a confused, elderly man telling war stories. He was a documented war hero whose accounts had been verified by Pentagon footage that proved his extraordinary service. Eddie himself seemed pleased, but not surprised by the validation the footage provided. He had always known his stories were true, had never understood why people doubted accounts of experiences that remained vivid in his memory despite other cognitive challenges. The footage simply confirmed what he had been trying to share about the most significant period of his life. The apologies that followed from staff members were heartfelt and emotional. Janet Morrison, the activities coordinator, expressed particular regret for having treated Eddie's stories as therapeutic fiction rather than historical documentation. Her understanding of his storytelling sessions was completely transformed by evidence that showed him to be one of the most heroic residents the facility had ever housed. The relationship between Eddie and other residents changed dramatically as word of the footage spread throughout Sunset Manor. Veterans who had previously questioned his accounts now approached him with the respect due to someone whose service had exceeded their own. Non-military residents gained new appreciation for military service through Eddie's documented example of heroism under fire. The nursing home administration implemented changes in how veteran residents' military backgrounds were researched and documented. Understanding that Eddie's case demonstrated how significant service histories might be overlooked or dismissed without proper investigation. His experience became a catalyst for better recognition of veteran achievements within the facility. Military historians beyond Dr. Chen began requesting access to Eddie for interviews about his service. Understanding that his memories contained valuable information about helicopter operations that had shaped American military capabilities. His experiences provided insights into combat aviation that enhanced academic understanding of Vietnam War operations. The footage of Eddie's missions was eventually declassified and incorporated into military training programs, providing current helicopter pilots with examples of exceptional performance under combat conditions. His flying techniques and tactical decisions became part of instruction that enhanced contemporary military aviation capabilities. Media coverage of Eddie's story focused on themes of hidden heroism, the importance of believing veteran accounts, and the need for better documentation of military service records. His experience challenged assumptions about cognitive decline and its relationship to memory accuracy, particularly regarding traumatic or significant experiences. The Veterans Administration used Eddie's case to improve procedures for documenting and verifying veteran service records, ensuring that future cases of extraordinary service would be properly recorded and recognized rather than being lost to bureaucratic oversight or informal dismissal of veteran accounts. Military museums requested copies of Eddie's footage for permanent displays about helicopter operations and rescue missions during the Vietnam War. His documented heroism became part of institutional memory that honored helicopter pilots and their contributions to military success in challenging operational environments. The psychological impact of having his stories validated provided Eddie with renewed dignity and sense of purpose during his remaining years at Sunset Manor. The recognition he received from staff and residents enhanced his quality of life, while demonstrating the importance of respecting veteran experiences regardless of how extraordinary they might seem. Family members of soldiers who had been rescued by Eddie's missions began reaching out to express gratitude that had been building for decades without opportunity for direct expression. The connections that resulted provided Eddie with understanding of how his service had affected multiple generations of military families who owed their existence to his courage and skill. Educational programs about military service began incorporating Eddie's story as an example of how veteran accounts should be treated with respect and serious consideration rather than dismissal or skepticism. His experience demonstrated that extraordinary military service often sounded unbelievable to people who hadn't experienced similar situations. The combat footage that documented Eddie's missions became part of permanent archives that preserved evidence of American military heroism for future generations. His visual legacy provided proof that individual courage and skill could make extraordinary differences in life and death situations where split-second decisions determined outcomes for multiple people. Years later, Eddie's story continued to influence how veteran care facilities approached resident histories and storytelling, with his case serving as a reminder that apparent fiction might actually be documented fact that deserved research and verification rather than polite dismissal. His experience changed institutional understanding of the relationship between memory, storytelling, and historical truth. Sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the most true, verified by footage that captures heroism in real time rather than memory colored by years of retelling. Sometimes cognitive decline affects everything except the memories that matter most, preserving accounts of extraordinary experiences while obscuring routine details of daily life. Eddie Martinez had never exaggerated his war stories or sought attention for his military service. His accounts had been accurate memories of experiences that had defined his understanding of duty, courage, and service to others. When Pentagon footage finally validated every detail he had shared, it demonstrated that some stories are too important to be dismissed, regardless of how extraordinary they might seem to people who had never witnessed similar heroism. The transformation at Sunset Manor following the footage viewing was profound and lasting, influencing how staff approached all veteran residents and their accounts of military service. Eddie's case became a catalyst for institutional change that enhanced respect for veteran experiences while improving documentation of resident military backgrounds and achievements. Training programs for nursing home staff began incorporating Eddie's story as a case study in the importance of believing and respecting veteran accounts, understanding that extraordinary military service often sounded unbelievable to people without military experience. His experience influenced professional development throughout the elder care industry. The classified nature of Eddie's missions meant that full recognition of his service had been delayed for decades, but the eventual declassification and public acknowledgement provided validation that enhanced his quality of life during his remaining years at the care facility. His story demonstrated the importance of proper documentation and recognition of veteran achievements. Military aviation historians incorporated Eddie's documented missions into comprehensive studies of helicopter operations during Vietnam, understanding that his experiences provided valuable insights into combat aviation that enhanced academic understanding of military tactics and pilot performance under extreme pressure. The psychological research studying memory and cognitive decline was influenced by Eddie's case, which demonstrated that traumatic or significant experiences could be preserved with remarkable accuracy even when other cognitive functions were compromised. His story contributed to understanding of how memory worked in cases of dementia and age-related cognitive changes. Veterans advocacy organizations used Eddie's experience to support improved procedures for documenting and verifying veteran service records, ensuring that future cases of extraordinary service would be properly recorded and recognized rather than being dismissed due to bureaucratic oversight or skepticism about veteran accounts. The footage of Eddie's missions was eventually incorporated into military training programs for helicopter pilots, providing current aviators with examples of exceptional performance under combat conditions. His flying techniques and tactical decisions became part of instruction that enhanced contemporary military aviation capabilities. Congressional testimony about veteran care included references to Eddie's case as an example of how extraordinary military service might be overlooked or dismissed without proper investigation and documentation. His story influenced policy discussions about improving recognition and care for veterans with distinguished service records. The media coverage of Eddie's story focused on broader themes about respecting elder experiences, the importance of proper documentation of military service, and the need for better training of care facility staff about veteran backgrounds and achievements. His case influenced public understanding of veteran issues and elder care quality. International conferences on military history featured presentations about Eddie's documented missions as examples of individual heroism under extreme circumstances. His story became part of global discussions about courage, duty, and the importance of preserving veteran experiences for future generations. The legal implications of Eddie's case influenced how care facilities approached resident rights and advocacy. Understanding that residents with cognitive challenges might still possess accurate memories of significant experiences that deserved respect and investigation rather than dismissal as confused recollections. Military museums requested copies of Eddie's combat footage for permanent displays about helicopter operations and rescue missions during the Vietnam War. His documented heroism became part of institutional memory that honored helicopter pilots and their contributions to military success in challenging operational environments. The technology used to preserve and digitize Eddie's combat footage was improved based on lessons learned from his case, ensuring that similar historical documentation would be properly maintained and accessible for future research and education. His story influenced military archival practices and historical preservation efforts. Educational curricula about military service began incorporating Eddie's experience as an example of how veteran accounts should be treated with respect and serious consideration rather than dismissal or skepticism. His case demonstrated that extraordinary military service often sounded unbelievable to people who hadn't experienced similar situations. The family counseling programs for relatives of residents with cognitive decline were enhanced by lessons learned from Eddie's case, helping families understand that their loved ones might retain accurate memories of significant experiences even when other cognitive functions were compromised. His story provided hope and guidance for families dealing with similar situations. The verification procedures for military service records were improved based on Eddie's experience, ensuring that future cases of exceptional service would be properly documented and recognized in care facility records. His case influenced institutional practices about researching and honoring resident military backgrounds. Veterans organizations established programs to visit care facilities and interview veteran residents about their military experiences, understanding that Eddie's case demonstrated how significant military history might be preserved in the memories of elderly veterans whose accounts deserved documentation and respect. The psychological counseling available to veteran residents was enhanced by understanding gained from Eddie's case about the relationship between memory, trauma, and cognitive decline. His experience influenced therapeutic approaches that honored veteran experiences while providing appropriate support for residents dealing with memory challenges. Military historians studying helicopter operations during Vietnam used Eddie's documented missions as primary source material for comprehensive analyses of combat aviation tactics and pilot performance under extreme pressure. His experiences contributed to scholarly understanding of military aviation history and combat effectiveness. The Pentagon's declassification procedures were influenced by Eddie's case, leading to more systematic review of historical military footage and documentation that might provide recognition for veteran service that had been classified for security reasons. His story influenced how military archives were managed and made accessible. International military cooperation programs featured Eddie's story as an example of how individual courage and skill could make extraordinary differences in combat situations. His documented heroism became part of discussions about military training and the development of exceptional military personnel across different national contexts. The advanced care planning procedures for veteran residents were improved based on lessons learned from Eddie's case, ensuring that military backgrounds and achievements were properly documented and considered in care decisions. His experience influenced how facilities approached veteran-specific needs and recognition. Years later, Eddie's story continued to influence training programs for care facility staff, military historians, and veterans advocates who understood that his case demonstrated the importance of respecting veteran experiences and properly investigating claims that might seem extraordinary but could be verified through appropriate research and documentation. The legacy of Eddie's verified combat footage extended beyond individual recognition to broader understanding of how military history should be preserved, how veteran accounts should be treated, and how extraordinary service could be properly documented and honored even decades after original events occurred. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, preserved in Pentagon archives waiting for the right moment to validate experiences that seem too extraordinary for one person to have lived. Sometimes the most remarkable stories come from the most modest people, who carry their heroism quietly until evidence emerges to confirm what they've been saying all along. Eddie Martinez never sought dramatic recognition for his military service or expected anyone to believe accounts that sounded like Hollywood fiction rather than military history. His stories had been accurate memories of experiences that had defined his understanding of duty, courage, and service under impossible circumstances. When classified footage finally validated every detail he had shared, it demonstrated that some experiences transcend normal human understanding while remaining completely true for those who lived through them. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever dismissed someone's account of their experiences only to discover later that their story was completely accurate? Have you encountered situations where truth seemed stranger than fiction until evidence proved the extraordinary was actually routine for some people? Tell us in the comments about times when verification changed your understanding of what was possible. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.